Hello everybody and welcome back to Odin's Movie Blog. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we were talking about this right here. So, did any of y'all know that Kathleen Kennedy saved Star Wars? I mean, honestly, Chris Agar from Screen Rant, what are you looking at? What are you paying attention to? And don't say, oh, well, if you go back to Force Awakens, it made $2 billion. Well, the reason why it made $2 billion was, one, mostly because we had a very long delay. We had a very long sabbatical, essentially, between the time of the last Star Wars film and the most recent one. And obviously, there was a lot of hype. There was a lot of excitement for it. We were very excited to see the old school characters. We wanted to go see Luke Skywalker again. We want to see Han Solo again. That's the reason why it made money. And guess what? It was a decent film. It was a rehash of A New Hope. But you know what? For starting off and for starting things back, that was okay. Most of us were willing to let that go. And so it made a lot of money. Fast forward to The Last Jedi. Most fans, or at least half of fans, hated it. Saw it as destroying the Star Wars universe, and not because, oh, they just hate diversity. No, it's because the story was bad. Objectively speaking, the story was bad. Go check out my guy, Matthew Kadish, who does several articles explaining why, from an objective standpoint, the narrative just doesn't work. The narrative breaks down. Of course, you got the hyperspace ramming. You've got characters that have no justification, with no explanation, with no actual background description, and they're just supposed to randomly be good at things. This is not something that's good storytelling. And so that film, obviously, makes $700 million less. Well, the question is, oh, it still makes $1.3 billion. Well, yeah, that might be the case, but keep in mind, it's because people were very excited still from the original Star Wars going out. 70% of that $1.3 billion was made in the first 2 weeks, obviously, when people were excited for it. But then as the word of mouth began to spread, that number started to drop very drastically. You look at the numbers in China, dropped tremendously. And then the excuse that they came out with for that number was, oh, well, that's just because they didn't grow up with Star Wars. But then if you go to any other franchise like Mission Impossible, when you go to movies like The Meg, when you go to all these other movies that come out and they do really, really well in China, especially Mission Impossible. I mean, that's a series that has been around for a very long time and yet does better and better every single time. Why? Because they keep making the movies better and better and better. So to try and say that Kathleen Kennedy saved Star Wars, when you see this progression, this downward trajectory of the box office totals, not to mention we go to Solo. Solo is Kathleen Kennedy's fault. There is no one else to blame for Solo. Some people might say, oh, it's John Kasdan's fault. Oh, it might be, that's the time of the year that it came out and all these other things. No. Kathleen Kennedy is the reason why that movie lost $200 million at the box office. Why? She was the one that chose Lord and Miller to be the directors. She is the one that allowed them to film 80% of the movie before she stepped in and said, oh, your vision is not matching with mine. She is the one that hired Ron Howard and said, Ron, what do you need? And he says, I need to refilm most of the film. Okay, go ahead and do that. She is the one that led to the ballooning of the budget. She is the one that led to all of these things happening. It was her choices that led to this. She was responsible. And guess what? The film made nothing. The film did not even make $400 million. And when you break down the fact that it's only going to make 60% of that $392 million, it's at a loss of at least $200 million. And some people might say, oh, down the road, it'll make up its money. Oh, I heard it's doing very well in the digital sales and it's doing very well in Blu-ray sales. I'm sorry, but you cannot tell me that this film, based on the reactions, again, the reaction was a lot more positive than with The Last Jedi, but you cannot tell me that film is going to outsell Rogue One or outsell Last Jedi or outsell any of these movies. You just cannot tell me that. There were not enough people out there who said, oh, I really want to see this film. Oh, I really want to see a Solo film. Most people just didn't care. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that so many people were let down by The Last Jedi, but also because the way that Disney has been handling Star Wars has been basically attacking the original fan base, attacking the people who love the originals, attacking all those people, and then saying, oh, too bad, we're, it's all about diversity now and forced gender, blah, 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 blah. The Force is female, blah, 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 blah. Well, guess what? Most people don't like that message. Most people don't like to be preached to. I've said this countless times on this channel. We want to be entertained. We don't want to be preached to. And because of this messaging, not just in the films, but also surrounding the films by the media, that is the reason why there has been so much backlash to everything that's been going on. 2 days ago now at this point, Kathleen Kennedy gets re-signed for another 3 years as head of Lucasfilm. Why? To the person who's just looking at this, there is no reason why. Behind the scenes, there might be political reasoning. There might be just the fact that they just don't care about the numbers. All they care about is the messaging, and since they like the messaging, they're fine with it. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons that could end up leading to it. But to try and say, as Screen Rant is trying to say here, that Kathleen Kennedy saved Star Wars, and it's going to go on to say save Star Wars from George Lucas, is ridiculous. When you look at Star Wars, before Disney took over. It was actually going on a pretty good trajectory. Obviously, I'm not going to defend the prequels. The prequels at least are a cohesive story. This new trilogy, because of Last Jedi, is going to be all over the place when the third film finally comes out. And so when you look at that, you say, oh yeah, the Disney's doing a great job. But let's talk about Star Wars. Okay, the argument's going to be, okay, well, it's because, crazy George Lucas had those prequels. And it's like, yeah, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to defend the prequels. Revenge of the Sith, decent film. The other two, I can live without them. That's just me personally. I respect anyone that actually likes those stories, and I understand why you do. But let's look at Star Wars, the health of Star Wars at that time. The EU was booming. Novels, stories, canon, not canon, all these things were doing very well. They were selling well, and people were loving them. Everyone I talked to that is a diehard Star Wars fan is in love with a lot of these stories from the EU and said, hey, why didn't Disney bring in these stories instead? Why did they make a solo film instead of making a Thrawn film, or instead of making, a Knights of the Old Republic or anything about the Old Republic film instead? There are all these different ways that they could have gone about it. It's because they obviously just don't understand or don't really love Star Wars the same way that fans do. And that absolutely plays in the films that are being made, because those are not being made for lovers of the franchise. That is them trying to bring in a new audience, but the problem is it's not working. The new audience that you're trying to bring in isn't paying for the merchandise, isn't paying to see the movie, isn't paying to see it multiple times, opening night, all the Blu-rays and digital sales and all these other things. It's not happening. It's on a downward trajectory. If you look at all the numbers, that is the direction that it's going. But Star Wars, prior to Disney taking over, was actually on the up and up, because guess what? Clone Wars, a very good series. And it was a series that not only appealed to teenagers, not only appealed to kids, but also to adults, to people who grew up in the 1970s, who saw the original Star Wars as kids. Because guess what? Clone Wars was a good show. It was a well-rounded family show. It had dark themes to it that audiences, adult audiences were able to appreciate, but it also still had that fun levity to it as well as an animated series. So therefore, kids could still enjoy it. Even though they may not understand everything that was going on, they could at least appreciate it. Rebels was obviously going in a different direction. It was going more towards trying to gear towards the kids, but even then, still had, from what I've been told from people who watch it, because again, I'm on the way, I'm 5 seasons in the Clone Wars as we speak, and it was geared more towards kids, but even so, adults still were able to find enjoyment in the overall story arcs, because they were able to tie back storylines that were originally established by Clone Wars. So you have all these things going on, and God knows is that at that point, because it was doing better, because it was doing well, because it was moving forward, eventually a new film could have been on the brink. Eventually, George Lucas could have stepped up. Now, I'm not going to say that George Lucas is an amazing screenwriter, because most people would say that his dialogue is atrocious, even when you go back to the original films. However, if George Lucas was able to stay on as a producer, as the creator, maybe having some oversight, and let someone else direct, or let someone else write, at the very least, let someone else write, we could have had an amazing Star Wars, and guess what? It would have kept going, and it would have kept getting bigger and better. Just to try and say, oh, Kathleen Kennedy saved Star Wars. No, she did not. She took it, she used the good sentiment, the goodwill that was there because of everything that George Lucas had put and created before her, and then she single-handedly destroyed it by her own decisions. And obviously we can point to Rian Johnson, but who was the one that hired Rian Johnson and loves Rian Johnson's work and wants to give him a trilogy? This woman right here, Kathleen Kennedy. But let's just read a little bit. Let's just read a little bit of this article. Kathleen Kennedy saved the Star Wars franchise. Handpicked by George Lucas to run Lucasfilm after the studio was acquired by Disney in 2012, Kennedy had the gargantuan task of reviving one of the cinema's landmark properties, just reviving it from death. Star Wars has been a pop culture staple since its debut in 1977, but the property has been dormant for many years following the release of Revenge of the Sith. Really? So Clone Wars never happened? Rebels never happened? The EU books? None of that ever happened? The games that came out? None of those happened? None of those were there? Oh no, it was completely dead. See, in the minds of the media, in the minds of the people trying to defend her, trying to defend Disney, they want to forget about how things were beforehand. They want to forget about the fact that there was life outside of Disney. There was a time between George Lucas's prequels and what we have now in the new Star Wars trilogy, but they don't want to think about that. What's more is that the Mouse House dropped $4 billion to get their hands on the Star Wars rights. There's still debate about whether or not they've even made that money up, because obviously they'll say, oh, they've made over $4 billion. Yeah, but they only get 60% of that, so they're maybe about halfway there, a little over halfway there. And again, eventually they're going to get to that point, and that's not even taking into account any merchandising sales, etc. But at the end of the day, if they're going on this downward trajectory, eventually they're going to start to lose more money than they're making. It's not going to be good for them overall. Meaning they had big plans for the brand that went beyond just making a new trilogy in the Skywalker saga. But no one would even say that this is really a Skywalker saga trilogy, because this is focusing on characters that have very little interest, or at least had potential that was just done away with in The Last Jedi, who people just don't care about. And then the people that we did care about, the people that we did go to see this movie to go see, have either been killed or have just been so emasculated created have just been so utterly destroyed that their characters are nothing like they were when they were originally established, nothing like they were continuing through the EU, through the novels, has just done away with. It was just like, oh no, Luke's just going to be an idiot. Luke is no longer the New Hope. Luke just randomly decided to start wanting to kill his nephew because of reasons. You know, it was just all of this stupid stuff that happened. On paper, Kennedy read as an excellent choice to follow Lucas. A longtime collaborator of Steven Spielberg, Kennedy has been a top Hollywood producer for decades, and her resume includes some of the best films of all time. Again, I'm not denying her as a producer, but as a head of Lucasfilm, she's still got a lot to prove. A hell of a lot to prove, for sure. Before we examine Kennedy's contributions to Star Wars, it's worth taking a look where the franchise was before its time under the Disney umbrella. Oh, so you're actually going to talk about it. George Lucas released the prequel trilogy through 20th Century Fox between 1999 and 2005, and everyone thought that was it. The story of Anakin Skywalker's rise and fall redemption had been told and the saga came to a close. Yes, Star Wars existed in other mediums, the Clone Wars TV show, novels, etc. Okay, so you acknowledge it, you say, oh, but let's not talk about that. But it largely faded from the spotlight with no new live-action movies on the horizon. In a 2005 interview, Lucas even went so far as to say there are no episodes 7, and he was moving on to other projects. Okay, but you can't just write off Clone Wars. Clone Wars was very successful. You can't just write these things off. The novels were very successful. So just because in your mind it wasn't successful, just because it wasn't this huge pop culture icon, well, obviously, I mean, he was moving his attention to other projects, to other mediums, to tell his story, to keep on making new projects. Who's to say that he wouldn't eventually make a new movie? May not have been in episode 7, but who's to say that he would not want to continue the story in some other way? So again, these people are just writing things off. They're completely writing things off. All right, so Kennedy's big decisions bring Star Wars back. Oh, just look at that image right there. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. And yeah, I'm just going to go page 2. Kennedy's mistakes don't outweigh the good. Oh, man, page 2? Kennedy's Star Wars mistakes? Oh, of course, yes, Solo. Yeah, they're gonna underline that, but there's no denying Kennedy mismanaged that situation. Disney did too, allowing Phil Lord and Chris Miller to shoot a majority of the film before firing them over creative differences. Solo's budget had to be doubled in order to complete Ron Howard's research, which ultimately doomed the spin-off commercially. Oh yeah, let's just but yeah, it outweighs it. All the good things she's done more good things for Star Wars than bad. Yeah, just look at that. I ruined Star Wars, guys, but this person's saying I saved it because they don't know what they're talking about. Even with Solo's falling short of financial expectations, Star Wars has had a fruitful run under Kennedy's watch. And again, you cannot, there's that $4.5 billion. Yes, they only got 60% of that, by the way. They only got 60% of that money. So it's actually half of that, which means they haven't made back what they priced. So surpassing Lucasfilm's sales price. No, they haven't. At least not from the film's perspective. Maybe if you take in other mediums, but from the film's point of view, they only get 60% of the total box office take. That's just math. That's just numbers. Go ahead and do your own research on that. That is the fact. And so you trying to say this, trying to say, oh yeah, see, overall it's fine. No, it's not fine. It's not fine because we have to look at the here and now. $200 million loss for Solo. Episode 9 is still being made. She is still the head of it. She is still going to be around for Celebration for Episode 9. She got the 3-year contract extension. And you have Rian Johnson coming out on Twitter attacking the fans. Guess what? Things are going to get worse. Not going to get better. Because it's already been on a downward trajectory. Because she's already been pissing off fans over the years. Over every single film. Every choice that she's decided to make. And now with this, and especially with people like Rian Johnson mocking the fans, mocking the people who don't like the current direction of Star Wars, it's going to get worse because now people who are on the fence on boycott are going to be full on boycott, and more people who are planning on still going to see it are going to be like, you know what, maybe I'll pay to go see and give my money to Jumanji 2 instead. Maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll go give my money to Wonder Woman 1984 if it's still in theaters. Maybe I'll go ahead and do that instead. Because guess what? You're not winning Star Wars fans back. You're not winning the fandom back. You're making things worse for you to try and say, Screen Rant, that Kathleen Kennedy saved Star Wars by ignoring facts. And I already pointed out where you were just underlying and undermining everything that George Lucas had done between the prequels and the time that Disney took over. You undermined it completely. The fact that you are looking at this, you're looking at the fact that they have had to halt production on other films because of how bad Solo did, and you're just going to ignore that $200 million loss, and you're going to think that Episode 9 is going to be this huge blockbuster. Just wait until those numbers come out. I'm not saying that it's not going to make money. I'm not saying that it's not going to at least be somewhat profitable. But at this point, since you are continuing to piss off people, since you are continuing to make people angry and make people want to boycott you, because guess what? We want good Star Wars films. We don't want to do this. We want to talk good about Star Wars. But if they're going to keep on doing this, and not only that, but also doubling down on what has already occurred, we're not going to stand for that anymore. But anyway, guys, what are y'all's thoughts about this? Do you think that Kathleen Kennedy saved Star Wars? Please let me know in the comments below. I greatly appreciate it. I cannot wait to read those responses to that question. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. And if you like this video, hit that thumbs up, hit that subscribe. It helps me out a lot. You are all amazing people. Have a great day. And as always, God bless.